Welcome to Ocean Stories, a podcast hosted by me, Lydia Carey,
and me, Sarah Hersping. We may not be marine experts or even professional scuba divers, but we are curious about the ocean and ways to protect it.
Every week, we chat with conservationists, researchers, business owners, and anyone else with an ocean story to tell.
So whether you're a scientist or someone who's simply curious about the big blue, you're in the right spot. We can't save the seas alone,
but we can do it together.
Welcome back to episode 10 of the Ocean Stories podcast. It's crazy. Does it feel like 10? I feel like it feels like way more. What do you think?
10 weeks we've been at this, and I totally agree. We talk about it all the time, but we have come so far from when we first started, and it's really fun to see how it feels like when we started, we were just babies that had no idea what was going on, and now it's only been 10 weeks, and I'm like, what's up? Like, yeah.
I know, it's so funny. Actually, I edited the one that's coming up now, and it's really interesting to listen to, but it was funny because it was one of the first ones we recorded, and back then we would sometimes like say one weird word and be like, oh, can I ask this question again? Meanwhile, now we're just stumbling and saying the weirdest stuff, and it's just, I don't know, like the confidence and also like getting red when someone says something crazy.
Yes, I was gonna say, so in this episode, you can check out in the YouTube video that whenever I speak, my face changes color because I was so nervous. I was just nervous about everything. So
yeah, and I genuinely, if I tell you, when I look at both of us, I'm like, who are these people? Which doesn't make sense. It's been 10 weeks, but it feels like we were 14 in this video. Like, I don't even know.
To our listeners, we're getting better every day. We've exponentially, I'm serious, like we have exponentially improved our interview skills. I mean, we're improving all the time, so...
But also, if you think about the crash course from like going from absolutely nothing to then recording, I don't even know like how many things we've recorded at this point, but it's far from the 20.
True.
So yeah, but this is still episode 10. It's actually a really fun one. It's super interesting. It's very related to what Lydia studied in school. Lydia actually, well, you go because you were, during that episode, Lydia's like, oh yeah, you're just like relating everything. I feel like I just
I was geeking out, and I was having trouble even articulating what I meant, but my seed majors, my community development majors, this one's for you. It's just really cool to hear from people that are working super cool jobs, working in communities, trying to better a situation, whether it's where you're from or whether it's abroad, in this case, in Indonesia. It's just super cool to hear about someone like that's their career. They're working in all these community-led programs that are environmental, they're related to humans, they're like intersecting issues. This is like everything I studied, and I just found it, wow, super interesting. And just, like I said, fun to hear about that someone is actually out there doing this. And I'm sure there's lots of other people out there with these types of jobs. So if you're a seed major, if any of that's interesting to you, human environment intersections, you're gonna love this episode.
And one thing I actually was really inspired by is I feel like this episode is, everything we're talking about is placed on a little tiny island in Indonesia, and it's crazy how much impact they have, not only on the island but also on just generally the ecosystems, and like maybe later on replicating what's happening on the island on a bigger scale. And I feel like in this day and age, because everything is so international and the sky's the limit, and with whatever social media, everyone wants like an international business, you always like reach for the stars, which is good, but it was really inspiring that sometimes you can actually do a lot if you focus on the place that you are and focus on the community that you are in, and then maybe like, I don't know, they're literally inventing stuff that hopefully one day can be placed everywhere in the world, but they invented it by focusing on what they have, what the issues are, how they can fix what's right in front of them, and so much came out of it. So I think that was super inspiring and really cool.
Yes, solutions-oriented, optimistic. By the time this comes out, our New Year's episode will be out, so go listen to that to hear us talk about climate solutions and being positive and focusing on the people that are actually doing amazing things, like you said, literally inventing things to save the coral and what have you. So
this one is about corals, about waste management, about baby turtles, and about horses. Like, how many boxes
All of
can you
that.
tick?
Community.
It's great. It's really exciting. So yeah, who are we talking today? Who are we talking today? Who are we talking
Who are we
to
talking
today?
to today? We are talking to Siân from Gili Eco Trust. She is originally from the UK, but has living in the Gili Islands in Indonesia for 11 years. If you don't know where that is, it is off the northwest coast of Lombok, Indonesia. I had to look at a map, so no hate if you didn't know where that was. Siân started by working on projects that were about nesting turtles and mangrove restoration, and then did coral restoration and fell in love with it, and has been working on coral restoration ever since. So quite a wide range of topics, like Sarah said. And now she's working for Gili Eco Trust, which is an organization doing all sorts of conservation, waste management, ocean protection, awareness, education stuff on Gili T, the island. So we're super excited for you to hear this episode. Thank you, Siân, for coming on. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Ocean Stories.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
I'm really well. I'm really happy to be here as well. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Yeah, we're
Thank
super
you. We're so
excited
happy
to
to have
have you. Where are you today?
So right now I am in Gili Trawangan. So it's a tiny little island off the coast of Lombok, which is about 2 hours away from Bali in Indonesia.
Lovely. And
So
tell us.
quite the time difference from you guys.
Yeah.
Oh,
once
for
again.
sure. We are getting better and better at handling these time differences. How long have you been there?
I've been living on Gili Trawangan for the last 11 years. I wish I'd spent more time traveling the rest of Indonesia, but I know this island very, very well now.
It is not that big, right? I think I've
It is
visited it
not that
once.
big.
And is it the
You
one with
have-
the horses?
Yes, there's lots of ponies, so it's quite very unique in the sense that there's never been allowed any motorized cars or motorized vehicles. So the traditional way of transport is horse and cart or push bike. So everybody's on a bike. I would say everybody's a little bit fitter than they usually are, but if you go all the way around the island, it's about 7 kilometers all the way around. So you can kind of walk the entire island in about an hour and a half.
Yeah, I remember that. I actually, when I was on Bali working with Emma, I came over there quite a few times. It was really fun,
Perfect.
but yeah, it is definitely small. I did the whole loop in what you just said,
Yeah,
probably less than 2
less
hours.
time probably.
But beautiful. It's so pretty. The beaches are incredible.
Definitely one of the main reasons why I'm here, I think. The beaches and the ocean, and it's just a stunning, really, really stunning place to live.
I can only imagine. So, you are from England, is that correct?
I am, yes. I'm originally from the UK.
So, how did you end up in Bali?
Well, the journey, I've always been obsessed with the ocean, and we didn't really travel too much when I was younger and when I was a child. We did a lot of holidays around the UK, especially in Wales, because it's one of the best places and the wettest places to go camping. Don't know if anybody's ever been to Wales. But yeah, the coastlines there are beautiful. So we spent every holiday rock pooling and jumping in the sea and jumping into waves. So even though I grew up in a forest called the Forest of Dean, so we literally lived in a forest, we would always make
Ooh.
escapes to the coast and spend as much time by the sea and in the sea and under the sea as possible. And I think jumping forwards to our first holiday abroad, we went to Zante, and I did my first scuba dive at 12 years old. And yeah, after that, I always wanted to be a dolphin when I was a kid because I was obsessed with dolphins and everything about dolphins. And then, yeah, I took the plunge, and my parents got me this Discover scuba dive. And yeah, I was instantly hooked. Didn't have the money to be hooked at 12, but then when I finished college, I took a gap year and went scuba diving, did as many courses as I could. I dived a bit in Egypt, and then I went straight over to Malaysia when I was 18 and started doing some conservation work there with turtles. So then my obsession changed from dolphins to turtles, and then I came back to the UK and studied geography in Swansea, so back to Wales because that's where my heart is really. And then I wanted to study marine biology because I thought that was the path to kind of be in the marine world and to make sure that I could do everything with the ocean. Unfortunately, I didn't get the right results that I wanted to get into that. So I switched over to geography and geology. And honestly, that was probably the best thing that I could have chosen, just because geography is so applicable to everything about the way that we are in this world and the way that the world is changing. So we did a lot of work in climatology, glaciology, oceanography, and yeah, it was just kind of seeing how humans are interacting with the world and how sustainable that is. And yeah, it took me on a path of being obsessed with everything about the environment, everything about our world, and just making sure that I could try and do a little bit to help that as well. So once I finished uni, whilst I was in uni, I went to Honduras to study mangrove populations and eco restoration over there. So that was really, really cool. And then, I feel like my mind was always a little bit all over the place, not really knowing what I wanted to do. So I spent 2 months there and really thought that, mangroves is my thing. That's my jam. I really love, being in mangroves, this really stinky, silty mud, and collecting sediment samples, taking them back to what we call the poo lab, just because everything smelt quite bad and sulfurous, which was really, really cool. And I absolutely loved doing that. I then ended up going back to Malaysia, to the same island where I did some turtle conservation when I was 18. And I think I went back when I was like 23. And then after that, I continued there. I did my dive master. So I was diving this, wherever I was around the world, and finished my dive master in Malaysia, and carried on working with this turtle project, which has still got like a massive place in my heart. And then from there, I went back to England. I got a job, which was with a charity, but it wasn't anything about the environment. I was just looking for a really good summer job, and they had some amazing incentives with different travel companies. So I actually ended up winning a trip to kind of anywhere on this gap year website that this company that I was working with was partnered with. And they gave me the option for a free trip to Indonesia to do a 6-week coral conservation course. And yeah, I think in week 2 of coming to Indonesia, just literally flying straight to this tiny little island with zero research about what Gili Trawangan was all about. I actually was told there was a lot of mangroves here, and there definitely aren't a lot of mangroves, but there are a lot of turtles, and the corals are fantastic. And yeah, I think it was within the 2nd week of my training with the Gili Eco Trust and doing this conservation course at Trawangan Dive, I was hooked, and I was like, okay, I think I found my calling. I think this is what I want to do and where I want to be. And now, 11 years later, I can teach the course myself. So yeah, I feel like that's kind of the path that got me to Gili T was definitely not one that I was expecting. So then after 5 years of being a diving instructor and 5 years of non-stop harassment for the poor team at Gili Eco Trust to let me work with them, they finally agreed in 2016. So I've been working with the Gili Eco Trust full-time instead of just a die-hard volunteer ever since then.
Wow, that's incredible. That's really cool that you won this trip, and that's how you ended up in the place that you live now.
I feel really, really lucky, and to just get that experience and to see that, 11 years later, then that is, the thing that really changed my life and managed to make me come out here and stay out here, which is good. The cat has now noticed that there's stuff, so I apologize for the cat, and the rooster's outside, and it's just a bit of a crazy place, but yeah.
That's just authentic.
I was going to say, you're just being real.
As soon as you start hearing the roosters through the microphone, then you'll hear how authentic it is.
It's awesome to hear about all the work you've been doing in coral restoration in the years that you've been living there. Can you talk, you mentioned Gili Eco Trust. Can you talk a little bit about how your work, I cannot speak today. Is it Gili or Gili?
Gili.
I really have always said Gili my whole life.
That's fine. That's I mean, even the word Trawangan, that took me months to be able to pronounce that word.
Yeah, I'm always like Tarangang.
We get some really good ones here.
For those of us who don't know, can you paint us a picture of what the biggest environmental challenges are on the island, and who's working on them, and what's the situation?
I'd say right now, which is good and bad, but the main issue with the island is over-tourism. So it's a term I've heard being coined more recently than for a long time, because obviously we've got tourism is great. It brings lots of money to the economy and everything. There's a massive element of unsustainable tourism, just different things that are not working in the way that it should be. And then over tourism, whereas, this is a finite island, it's tiny. People come here to see palm trees and beautiful white beaches, but obviously to get the sheer numbers of people that want to come now, they've cut down so many of the trees, they've concreted all the dirt paths. The beaches have had all the trees cut down, so the beaches have actually eroded quite a lot. So we do have a lot of problems, which is all, indirectly related to tourism, from some way or another. And then the other massive factor is plastic pollution, and that comes from tourism, but indirectly it's not just the tourists that are bringing the rubbish, and that's not the main issue. It's just the fact that, again, waste management on a tiny island, coupled with the complications with it being a government job to try and pick up the waste, but they don't do it. So it's been quite complicated in that sense. But I think they're the two kind of main issues that we're trying to fight, is over tourism and pollution, which, again, they're brother and sister in that as well.
Do you think there would be a way to have a more sustainable tourism on the island? Like, would it just be minimizing the crowds that are coming in, or like, is there a concept how it could be done more sustainably?
Yeah, I mean, I think the island can definitely handle the amount of people. It's just the way that everything is kind of put together is unsustainable. So the island is growing in popularity. It's boosting the economy. So all of these things are fantastic, especially for the local community that have had, it's been a really shitty few years for all of the local community here with natural disasters and COVID and things like this. So having a busy island is fantastic for the economy, but if it could be done in a more sustainable way, it's so achievable. We're such a tiny island, and I always look at it as we're kind of like a tiny little case study of like an example of what the world is. We have all the same problems as the rest of the world does, but we're just all put into like this tiny, tiny little circle of an island. So if we can create a sustainable model on an island this size, then that can be replicated and expanded to other islands. So we're trying to take some of our sustainable projects over to Gili Meno and Gili Air. So then, we can already replicate into islands that are the same size, similar kind of area and climate and everything, and then move to bigger places like mainland of Lombok and mainland of Bali and different parts of Southeast Asia. So I think that once you have a good model in place, give or take a few different conditional differences, it's hopefully a model that can be replicated and taken to different places.
That is really cool how you said it's like a small example of the bigger world, and that you can kind of experiment around. That's probably also how the waste management, I imagine it's just easier because the place is so small to just have a better overview of everything that's going on. And can you talk a little bit more about the waste management side of things?
Yeah, it is meant to be a state kind of service. So just like electricity and water, waste management should be done by the government. They haven't been doing it here since about 2016, 2017. I think the whole system kind of collapsed. So after 4 or 5 days, the island has realized that with nobody picking up rubbish for 4 or 5 days, just it's hot here, so stinky rubbish left on the streets, it's not pleasant for the people who have to walk past it. It's definitely not pleasant for tourism and things like this. So we took over very rapidly. We didn't want to, but there wasn't really anybody else in place, just because we were primarily a marine-based conservation organization rather than a waste management. But also what we found out is you cannot protect the ocean without sorting out the issue that is coming from the land, which is destroying and killing the ocean. So actually, by taking on the waste management, it was a massive struggle. But it just meant that we could then start implementing more things in place. So instead of just moving all of the rubbish from point A on the beach to where all the businesses are, to point B, which is the dump in the middle of the island, it's been there for about 30 years. And for this whole time, it's been, moving the rubbish from there to there, setting it on fire, problem's gone. We know that the problem hasn't actually gone. We know how toxic the smoke is. We know how bad the leaching is into the soil from all of this like very contaminated waste. So we also set up a bank sampa, which in English, it literally means the bank of rubbish. So people can bring their rubbish to the bank Sampa. It's like a recycling center. And there's lots of different types of plastics, especially, but also cardboard, tin, glass, that has a monetary value and can be either repurposed or recycled in Indonesia. So by setting up this waste bank, it meant that number one, we could start scanning the top of the dump by hand and picking up anything that had been mixed into the rubbish, which potentially could be recycled. But it also gave a chance to the local community to actually go out, pick up their own rubbish or pick up rubbish that they found on the streets and things, and bring it to the bank Sampa and get money for it as well. So it's a very small amount of money per plastic bottle that you get, but the sheer number of plastic bottles that are consumed on an island which is very warm and lots of tourists, we're getting thousands of plastic bottles every single day coming through the recycling center. So it was trying to set up like a little bit of a trash to cash scheme, so the locals could see a reason to keep everything clean. They make money out of it. We get a chance to compress it into massive blocks, and then we actually transport it off the island to Lombok. And then from there in Lombok, it goes through a recycling stream, usually ending up in places like Surabaya, which is one of the recycling capitals of Indonesia, where there it will start getting shredded and cleaned and then turned into different products. So in a nutshell, we go around the island every morning. We have some horse carts. We had to take them out of work in 2016 because they were not treated well at all. So that was a massive issue, is that the dump ponies were some of the least taken care of on the entire island. So it took a couple of weeks to get them up to health and to give them proper rest, which they'd never really had. And then in 2019, the government actually allowed us to bring on these motorized carts, these small kind of like vehicles that we can obviously load even more, and we can eliminate the essence of cruelty of using animals for picking up waste and working and things like that. So now we've got a good healthy mixture between two. So then we're trying to get the businesses to actually start separating their waste. If they start to recycle at source, then it obviously makes it a lot easier for us, and at a higher rate, the less contaminated rubbish, so we can actually recycle way more of it, get it off the island. Then the money that we sell the rubbish for in Lombok, that actually pays the salary of the staff that go and pick up all the rubbish. So that's trying to be a circular waste. The more rubbish we pick up, the better, because then that's more salary for the boys and a bonus if they, pick up the certain amount of plastic bottles and cans and things like this. So that's been working really well for the last few years. Another massive issue that we have is food waste from hotels and things. And then dealing with like glass bottles, because I don't know if you know that Gili Trawangan is a bit of a party island. So it's kind of, we get a lot of people coming from Bali just for drinking and parties, a lot of people from Australia, a lot of backpackers coming. And essentially, one of my biggest things is just trying to show people that the island isn't just for partying. There are so many other things that we can do, but we do get an insane amount of glass waste. So then it's also trying to utilize this glass waste into usable products around the island as well, because glass is heavy. Melting glass is quite difficult because of the energy taken to actually melt the glass is quite unsustainable as well in a place like this. So we've got massive machines which crush glass back into sand. So then we make like sandy aggregate, which we can then mix with cement powder, fresh water and glue. We make these massive construction bricks, which I'll hopefully need to build my new house with when it falls down. But yeah, we make these massive bricks, and they're really heavy because they've got loads of these glass shards in them. It creates like a much of a stronger bond by having this glass inside them. So when businesses build out of this, we're essentially building out of the waste that they've created before they've built their bar with these bricks and things. And the actual bricks themselves are just a lot cheaper than buying a regular brick on Gili. So we're trying to do lots of different solutions to, many, many problems that come with over-tourism, and just trying to tackle them in as many different ways as we can.
Something I love about this story that you just laid out, just talking about the waste management issue in and of itself, is how many players that are touch points on this sort of wicked problem. You have the tourists, different kinds of tourists, people coming for different reasons, whether to party, whether to dive, XYZ. You have the people that live there, the native population, the local population, and then people that have moved there. You have an animal welfare element actually involved, a scientific element with the people turning the glass into sand, into bricks and all of this, and then also working with the government. there's so many layers, and it's something you touched on in your life story when you were talking about your education, that the issues that impact the ocean are actually tied in so many ways to so many other groups of people. It really takes a lot of different players to tackle these issues, because plastic pollution is really one of the biggest threats to ocean health.
This is it. And it is, I don't want to say everything ends back at that, but that is definitely, as you say, one of the biggest threats I think that we're facing here, being in the ocean, being on the beaches. Not only, as we all know, is it killing our ocean life and our ecosystems that we depend on. The economy depends on that. Tourism depends on that. So not only are we sitting there consuming plastic with every single, drink of water and breath of air, it's the fact that if the island is full of visible rubbish, not just microplastics, then tourists will start to give that feedback to other tourists, and then people will stop coming. And, and then we go back to the sense that, then nobody's coming to the island. So we've got all of these hotels and stuff, which are then super empty, and then the local community has no money, then they do more unsustainable practices. So it is just, you can't really solve one thing without looking at all of the other things. And then when you kind of open that trap door, there's a lot of things.
So can you explain a little bit more what kind of projects Gili Eco Trust is actually doing? Because we already touched on the waste management. I'm pretty sure there is something about coral restoration, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's not all of it. Can you explain like all of the different parts of the charity?
Yeah. I feel like we try to split everything into 4 main pillars. The first one and foremost is marine conservation and ecosystem restoration, simply because that was the main basis of the charity being set up in the first place. It's my main passion. I came here for scuba diving and for coral reefs. And, the more time we spent underwater, then we realized that the issues did kind of move on the land as well. So that's where the waste management pillar comes in, which we've touched on. Animal welfare is a massive thing, just because the island the main transport is horse and cart. They don't have the same standards of welfare as we do in some Western countries, or the majority of Western countries. So it's a massive culture shock for tourists to come here and see this. Quite rightly so as well. So working with horse cart drivers is an incredibly long, slow process, but the slower the education, the more sustainable it is at the end. So we're making some really good progress, getting the drivers to trust us and giving out free medication, giving out free workshops, getting in farriers coming from international, usually from Australia. We'll get equine vets coming just for a holiday. They spend a week here and they just look at as many horses as possible and treat them with whatever wounds and ailments and injuries they might have. So that's been going on for a really long time. Also coupled under that is we are a crazy cat island. So there are so many cats on the island, less so now just because of the charities in place, but because no dogs have been allowed on the island ever. So we don't have a problem with dogs, but there has obviously been an increase in stray cats and things like this. So also under the Gili Eco Trust, we have the Cats of Gili. So that's a part of another project that we've got, a lovely crazy cat lady who is managing all by herself a cat cafe and a cat rescue centre. So anybody can bring stray cats there. We try and rehome them, but then also she's putting up like neutering programs to be able to neuter cats and put them back into where they live, just because even the stray cats here are very, very tame. They're very happy, and they're usually quite generously fed by whichever hotel that they live around. So we've started to see a massive improvement with less malnutrition cats, no dumped cats, not massive litters of kittens and things. So that's a really good thing. And then the final pillar is ecotourism and education. So again, it's never going to be the last because it's the least important, because without any education, then nobody will know about any of these things. So we do a lot of work in that. But yeah, I think that coral conservation and marine protection is the primary one, and the kind of format. The reason why we started everything is just because it is such a beautiful place to scuba dive in the Gili Islands. We've got beautiful coral reefs, some really, really nice dive sites. There's really strong ocean currents at times of the year, and this just brings in like a wealth of more biodiversity. And we've got loads of turtles as well. So that's another project that we've set up, is trying to protect and educate about all the turtles that we've got on the island too. So it's a little bit of everything.
I can't even imagine what a day-to-day looks like for you. How do you wake up in the
Completely
morning
different every day.
and decide which product to work on? Can you explain a little bit more about the work that you do for the marine conservation and what the coral restoration and now the new turtle project look like?
Yes. So since 2002, we've been working with an organization called Biorock and a restoration method of coral reefs, which basically uses mineral accretion. We create these massive metal structures because they're made out of locally sourced rebar. So we use exactly the same materials that all of the businesses are using to build. So it's very cheap for us to get this material. It's quite malleable, so we can actually bend these big structures into different shapes. So the best ones are like little domes and tunnels and things, but then onto that you can utilize an octopus or a crab or a palm tree or a fish or a shark. So then when you're actually looking at them, it's bringing in more tourists to actually see this work just because it looks really cool from above. It looks really cool to scuba dive. But when we actually go and transplant broken corals onto the structures, we're using, it's quite a unique technology, biorock, because we're actually putting electricity into the water and making this structure live. So by adding electricity to it, it doesn't mean that every time you go and touch it, you're going to get like a massive electric shock. It's only about 1 volt, 1.2 volts, but this is enough to create a reaction in the seawater. So we're getting minerals that are dissolved in the water, calcium and carbonate, which secrete onto the biorock structure. It creates a really big living structure of limestone, and limestone is the base factor in the skeleton of corals. So then we've kind of created this raised up bed. So it's just like gardening on land. It's much better to have like a raised up flower bed because there's less like chance of being smothered by dirt and sand and things. Same with sediment underwater. So they've got this little raised up bit, and it also removes the risk from predators, snails and crown of thorns and stuff climbing up and getting to them as well. So by putting them on these structures and putting it, turning it on, we're actually creating this big reaction. It boosts the growth of the corals up to 6 times. So they actually grow a lot faster on a biorock than they do on a natural reef. So it's really good for that. And then also when we do get times of temperature stresses in the ocean, we obviously know these are becoming more and more frequent and more severe. Then it's actually stopping or creating a very high resistance to coral bleaching as well. So it's worked really well in the last few mass bleaching events that we've had. We think that by the end of this year, we'll be entering another mass bleaching event. It hasn't happened in Asia just yet, but we've got lots of research in place to try and kind of check over the weeks to see kind of any changes in temperature, salinity, sun intensity, and coral growth and coral health. So that's one project that we've been doing, again, for quite a long time now, so almost 20 years. So we've got around 160 biorocks in place. It's a really, really cool dive site. It's one of the best places to night dive, I think, just because all the critters kind of go in there to hide at night from predators. So obviously if you go there with a torch, then you get to see all of these like very, very docile sleeping animals, and you get lots of hunting predatory fish on them as well. But they're really good for snorkeling. So we also try and take lots of snorkel tours of people who maybe aren't divers, but they want to, learn a bit more about the ocean environment. So we obviously, again, they turn into our entry-level eco warriors. So we want to be able to introduce them to this wonderful thing. And because the biorocks are all sunk at around 2 meters deep, between 2 meters and 10 meters, it just means that when you're snorkeling in these really clear waters, you can look down and you can see everything down there as well. So it's kind of good for education at the same time.
What has it been like sharing those beautiful biorock reef experiences with visitors to Gili T? What has the reaction and reception been like?
It takes me back to my first reaction. It was like, I'd spend all of my childhood watching David Attenborough documentaries and watching coral reefs and being obsessed about how beautiful and colorful they are. So to actually see that on people's faces, we show them a little documentary that was made by some film crew for us about building this biorock. So we kind of show them, how we build it, how we sink it, what it looks like a year later. And then we take them to actually show them the actual biorock, which is now, it's almost 8 years old, the one that's in this documentary. So to watch them go in the water is really nice. To listen to them come out with even more questions than they went in is really fantastic. And for them to kind of realize that you can actually just go snorkeling and see stuff just as amazing as going scuba diving. So it's really, really nice. It's really heartwarming to see all of the incredible hard work paying off visibly by looking at underwater, but then also to get the feedback from people who've never maybe seen this kind of thing before and how successful it is. So it's really, really promising.
I imagine it's quite a formative experience in terms of environmental education. If you're going to get an environmental education somewhere, it might as well be in Indonesia, doing the diving yourself, restoring the reefs yourself.
This is it. And it's really hard because a lot of conservation projects, you do need to be a marine biologist, and you do need to have all of these qualifications or a very strong background in oceanography or something like this. So to be able to give people a kind of hands-on introduction and to make them feel like they are really a part of it by going and seeing all of these reefs, maybe picking up some plastic as they go through, then it's just kind of putting in that thought that, you don't need to be a marine biologist to be able to get to this level. You can learn about it, you can do all these things, you can take action without having a background in it as well. So it's quite nice to show people that there are different options out there than just going down the scientific route.
So can you be a volunteer for that project without having a marine bio background? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, basically you can, as long as you're a scuba diver. I mean, most scuba divers like the ocean, which is the reason why they scuba dive. But that's basically the only thing that the interns do need beforehand, is to be a certified scuba diver and to love the ocean, want to learn something more about it. It means the interns that have come for personal development or on a gap year or haven't really decided what they would like to do with their life, they can then be assistant to these researchers, and they can get an amazing experience being able to help out, collect data, whether it's underwater or on the land, and just be a really good immersive experience to then see if that's something that they want to do.
What does this biorock look like? Could you do it on a really large scale? Could we technically do it everywhere around the world? Or is it more on a small scale? Like how can I imagine this whole project to look like?
That's a super good question. When you're saying large scale, like right now we've got them quite small scale, even though I think we've got the second largest concentration of biorocks in the world, and the largest is in Bali. So our partners in Bali are also doing a really good job with biorock as well. But other than that, it could be replicated for sure. It would cost more because of the electricity and things like this, but more the fact that it works so well in the Gillies just because of the climatic and the ocean conditions we have. There isn't one single reef restoration method which is going to work globally and uniform around the world. So it's definitely a chance to look at different conditions, different, amount of maintenance, the amount of resources that you have, people going and actually being able to look after them in the long run. So there's so many different elements before you think about putting a different method in place. Biorock works really well here just because it needs electricity. That's another one of its down points. We need to have businesses, or we need to have power on the beach. So it's perfect for Gili because there are businesses on every single part of this beach. So they actually donate one cable that goes all the way out to the biorock and powers that. It's quite unsustainable still because this power comes from the land, which comes from the Indonesian grid, which is mainly coal and fossil fuels. So then about 6 years ago, we started creating biorocks with solar power. So we got these big solar panels. They are actually floating on a barge above the coral reef itself. So its down point is because the sun is only out for 12 hours a day, we get some power and then some hours in the night when the biorocks are not powered. But obviously we've eliminated that use of fossil fuels and anything that we need to run from the land. To take that even further still, it's been Delphine's dream, because this has been her big project, is to create a way for us to be able to power the biorocks with renewable energies. We have these crazy currents which everybody loves to come diving in Gili, because you don't need to kick anywhere because the current takes everything for you. But yeah, we this is so much energy in the ocean that is just being essentially wasted, apart from the fish that are loving a little ride going through the currents. So we've teamed up with a company that's actually UK and Canadian based, a tech startup called Aquagen, and they've essentially helped us to invent, or they've invented it for us, a turbine which will actually utilize ocean currents. So instead of tidal or wave energy, this is actually underwater ocean currents to generate the power, to generate the electricity, which will then power the biorock reef, which is then in turn giving more stability to the reef, just because we've got more corals on it. So it will also slow down wave energy and action to be able to build up the beaches and things like this. So if we can get this all in place, this is all happening. It's been so long, we've been talking about it, in November. So very, very soon. We're getting some of these turbines brought over from the UK. We've got a massive, massive project that we're going to do in a new location off the coast of Gili, just because it's an area that's been damaged by I want to say storm damage, but also human influence. So then we've got this kind of massive area park where we're going to be building a new biorock site, and this is going to be based purely on ocean energy powering the entire thing. So blue renewables, which then does open up this technology to being able to be used in different locations that are more remote. They don't have access to electricity, but they do have access to these ocean currents. Then that is when biorock can really start to expand and go into different places where it's always been quite limited. So very exciting stuff.
The idea of bringing the tech world into ocean conservation is so exciting. I think that's something everyone can get behind. I've never seen a biorock. I'm imagining some type of metal rock, I'm embarrassed to say. What do they actually look like, and how long do they need to be powered? Is it for their entire life they need some sort of energy, or can they be turned off?
So they actually can look like anything. So that's the amazing thing, is usually we build a little metal like dome. So it's just out of wire. So if you think of a wire cage, like a gabion basket that you'd use in coastal protection and things like this, we just create it out of a metal structure. The fact that the metal can be moved into any different way means that the Jet Lagged came in and their logo was a paper aeroplane. So we made a paper aeroplane. We've made a whale shark. We've made SpongeBob SquarePants' house. So a little square house with the top bit on. We've made big domes. There's like a roller coaster thing under there. So yeah, what they look like is kind of up to the imagination of the artist. And at the moment for this big project, we do have an amazing artist who has been planning some fantastic things. So hopefully that will be updated soon on our socials. So we've got some stuff to show for that. And then your other part of the question, it was what they look like.
Do need to be powered indefinitely?
So they don't need to be powered indefinitely. If they ever get turned off, which is quite frequent here because we have so many power cuts on our beautiful little tropical paradise. So if we have a power cut, then this means that the biorock itself is kind of turned off. It won't kill it. It won't do anything. It would just then turn into a rock instead of a biorock. It won't get this increased boost of growth of the corals, and unfortunately it won't get the resilience that it gets to heat stresses. So we actually keep the biorocks on all the time. So we've got the solar panel ones which are on 12 hours a day. The majority of the ones are turned on as much as they can be. We do get some businesses which will forget that they have a biorock there and they'll pull it off to be able to charge their phone up. So some of the staff don't quite understand the need to keep it on all the time. But we do tend to keep them on all the time because the beaches are 24 hours a day parties and people there. So why not have one like light switch turned on just to be able to power these biorocks as well? So when we know we are getting periods of rise sea temperatures, so April is usually getting quite warm, so the temperatures of the ocean water go up to 32 or 33 degrees. So we spend the first 3 months of the year repairing all the cables, making sure everything is turned on, so that if and when we do have this time of warmer ocean waters, then we already know that our biorocks are turned on, the corals are strong, the corals are resilient, and they can basically almost dodge being bleached more than the rest of the natural reefs. So yeah, it's important for them to be turned on, especially just because global warming is no secret, and the status of our corals is getting worse. So the more power, the more help we can give them, the better, especially this next 6 months.
Damn, that's incredible. And it's really cool how you can not only save the corals, but create art with it, which, I would love to go dive there and just see it with my own eyes. But we'll make sure to share some photos. And I'm sure there's also a bunch of content on your socials to check those out. I want to see the SpongeBob house. That sounds so fun.
Yeah, it's very cute.
Can we touch a little bit on the other project that you are currently working on, the turtles? What does that look like? Is it on land or in the water? land turtles,
So
water
it's
turtles?
actually on land, which is bizarre. But we are famous, famous for partying. But it also is one of the best places to come and dive and see sea turtles. So for, many years, almost every dive you'll see sea turtles. You can snorkel, you can be standing waist deep in the ocean holding a beer, and a sea turtle will just swim past you. So they are no strangers to people around here. They're generally well respected, so people don't touch them or anything like this. So you can get a really good experience of them coming really, really close. One of the biggest issues we had is every year in nesting season for turtles, which is usually from April to around September. The turtles will come up the beach and they will lay their eggs, and then within 50 days they will hatch. Then they need to basically hatch out of their little nest, run down the beach, and out to the ocean. So they need to do all of this within kind of 72 hours, because that's the amount of energy they've got kind of saved up in their yolk sac to be able to get off the reef. So a number of issues has been brought up in the last few years, the last decade probably. The amount of parties on the beaches just means that there's loud music, there's lights, they've cut down all the trees, there's no sand left, there's bars everywhere, there's chairs, tables, bean bags. Literally there is just no space left for these turtles to start nesting. And when they do nest, unfortunately, the main kind of idea in Indonesia is that baby turtles are so vulnerable and so small that we need to put them in a bucket or a aquarium or a tank for between a year and 18 months, and feed them and keep them happy and healthy and make it a great tourist attraction, and then release them after this. So this process of head starting, it's been common knowledge in Indonesia since the 90s. I think the WWF and the government teamed up to say, turtle farming and head starting these turtles is the best way to protect our turtles. It's been since totally discredited that head starting is a viable option for turtle conservation. Obviously, that news travels incredibly slowly, so it's been quite a challenge to change people's minds about keeping captive turtles in tanks. There's still a lot of it in Bali, and as soon as you plaster the word turtle conservation on anything, somebody like me who loves the environment is going to throw money at it. So what we need to do now is kind of highlight the fact that you see the word conservation is unfortunately very, very greenwashed these days. So you really do need to read a lot into it. You need to do as much research on your own as possible. You need to, look at reviews and see what people have said about things, to kind of see whether you think it's sustainable or not. So here, in 2018, we did still used to have a turtle sanctuary. We call it the turtle mortuary just because there were so many fatalities of baby turtles in this place. They usually keep them in water, very, very shallow water. They don't clean the water. Baby turtles are generally solitary animals until they're, 15, 20, 25, when they're ready to come back to a reef to look for a mate. So to keep them in a tank with, 60 of their brothers and sisters, they fight each other, they get infections, and as soon as one animal gets infected, then the entire group of them will get infected as well. So it's definitely not a really healthy thing. There's still some on the other islands, which people do repeatedly kind of show us how disappointing the conditions are for these animals. So instead of us going in with guns blazing, which isn't really the way to do things in Indonesia and probably for the rest of the world as well, education is the key. So to be able to educate people, to tell them, this isn't a viable solution, but here is a good viable solution. So the Gili Eco Trust has never wanted to turn around and be like, no plastic straws unless there's an alternative. You can't wear this type of sun cream in until we've got a reef safe sun cream in place. So we always want to have a sustainable solution or an alternative to the issue before we go around loud mouthing about how bad something is. So the biggest issue with head starting is it's super widely known on the Gillies, or widely thought about on the Gillies, that this is a good thing to do. So generally when a turtle nest starts to hatch, people will then start picking them up and putting them straight into a bucket. So, this baby turtle, it's within days of its life, because it spends 3 days climbing out of the nest, out of the sand. It pokes its head up, and the first breath of oxygen is immediately been put into plastic. So, then its plastic journey is started before it's even hit the ocean. So what we're trying to do is to basically incentivize people to not put them into buckets, not sell the eggs, not eat the eggs, not keep the baby turtles as pets or put them in tanks, is that actually baby turtles need the ocean. And it goes back to what I was doing in Malaysia a few times, was, the hard work that this organization did in Malaysia to become a government-owned hatchery where they can keep their own eggs on the beach, they can guard their own eggs, and then when the eggs hatch, they can go straight into the sea. So I've kind of been following them, since I was 18, so a long time ago, and we're just kind of trying to follow the same things, but obviously being from Malaysia and Indonesia, it's different cultures, it's different regulations, it's different everything like this. So it's trying to work with the local community, and also people in power to try and put better things in place for turtles. It generally comes with awareness. There's only so much I can do as an expat and as a female, because it's quite a challenging place for even that. So when we started I think it was at the beginning of the pandemic, and we realized that, not great because the pandemic was terrible, but all the beach bars closed, all of the hotels closed, everybody left the island, including a lot of the local community, because they only are here for their jobs, so they're commuting every day or they're staying here before going back to their families. So we lost a massive proportion of people on the island. Everything turned off, and the amount of turtles that year that came to nest in 2020 starting from May was phenomenal. It was amazing. So we saw a lot more turtles, so we could really see a cause and effect. The beaches are quiet, more turtles are nesting. So that was really good, that was really promising. But then because people started getting desperate and didn't have jobs, we actually realized that then people start to come and take the eggs. They were selling the eggs as food for, 3 eggs for 10,000 rupiah, which is $1, $2, I think. So it's 50 cents, I think, actually. So it's crazy, crazy cheap. They are endangered animals. They were selling them for the same price as the cost of a chicken egg. And that was, desperate times on the island of people not having enough money to support themselves, support their families and things like this. So we started a patrol with a few of the islanders that were left on the island, just going around the island every single morning at sunrise to see if we could see the tracks going up the beach, log nests, hide nests, take measurements, take any predictions that we can, and then, cover the nest and wait 50 days for the turtles to hatch again. So we used to do this before, but we used to put big cages over the top of them with big signs saying, hey, there's turtle eggs under here. Here's some facts about turtles and da-da-da-da-da. And then we realized that when the island was empty, when we were going around protecting these turtle nests, we were just going, hey, poachers, there's a turtle nest right here. So then we kind of started highlighting a bigger issue, and we started kind of inviting poachers to come and steal the eggs. So we had to change our strategy once more. And that just meant trying to collect as much data by walking around the island and seeing 3 turtles have nested, rub out their tracks, so the next day we can find out how many turtles have nested again. So that was working really well. We had a really, really nice girl that joined us from that very first moment, called Matla, and she was one of the local girls. She just graduated from the high school here. And when we went around the table and we're like, why is everybody here? Who likes turtles? What do you want to learn and stuff? And she basically said, yeah, you guys came to our school, which is the little school on Gili T, years ago when she was in high school, and we handed out colorings and did some Green Day stuff. And ever since then, she's been fascinated by it and always been a bit too shy to kind of come and do stuff. But there she was, ready to be a volunteer. And she just took everything in her stride. She's done so much work for the Gili Eco Trust now. She's brought all of her friends in, and they make amazing little social media videos. They are up way later than me, so they spend the evenings on the beach being able to check to see if turtles are around and stuff. And now we've kind of created the Project Penyu, which is the turtle project. And then Mala and her friends are actually going to the different businesses, giving out free workshops to all of the local staff. They're on the beach all night long. When they finish work, they'll sit there and, have a drink or have a bonfire or something on the beach. So they're the people that really need to know about turtle conservation. As much as it's important that the tourists know and tourists get educated, right now we need to focus on the local community, really, really understanding how critical it is to keep these turtle nests safe. So these girls, they go to all the different coastal businesses, the beach businesses on Gili, and 20-minute, 30-minute workshop. We give them some bamboo straws. So if they don't have sustainable straws, they can, make that first step. They get provided them, they get a certificate, and they get kind of like a helpline. So if they do see any turtles on the beach, they can call these girls, and these girls can go down and kind of coach them through what to do, how to crowd control with all the tourists, and just make sure that everything's safe. So it's definitely been a lot easier with these girls doing this because their passion is through the roof. Like they're very, very motivated to help the environment and to help turtles. They are from Gili, so they were born here and went to school here. So they already have amazing levels of respect with the local community, and just having a team of women going around and doing this and local women doing it, then yeah, it's just fantastic because they're getting a name for themselves. I manage things from WhatsApp instead, and it just has empowered them to be able to do this project as well. I unexpectedly had to go home this summer in August, which is our turtle nesting season. So I was really panicked because, I was like, they're turtles, what are they going to do? And these girls just had everything sorted. So they managed everything at the time zone. The time difference was crazy. So by the time I woke up in the morning, I'd had a report that a turtle had nested somewhere, or, some action. Somebody was, stealing baby turtles and putting them in buckets and things. And by the time I'd woken up, they'd sat there and they'd formed their army. They'd gone down to the beach. They'd talked to whatever was happening, and they'd agreed to release them the next morning. So yeah, we had so many good, successful kind of releases, even if it was being released from a box from 12 hours or 6 hours or something. They managed to get them in the sea, and I think that's a massive win, because the more these girls get a name for themselves, then the more people know about it, and then the local staff can talk to their tourists. So indirectly it's still affecting the tourism, but yeah, to have a solid base to protect the turtles, or for them to have any chance to keep coming back to this party island, then yeah, I think we just need better foundations in place with the local community as well, in a nutshell.
I mean, so many interesting elements to this story. I'm totally geeking out right now. I studied community, environment, and development at university, and what's really striking me is just, I always look for patterns and themes in these sorts of conversations, and it's just really striking me how many similarities that you can find in working on these types of complicated, multi-layered issues with all of these different stakeholder groups that have different opinions. The science, the protocol of what to do with the turtles is changing, and then there's the element of identity. You mentioned that being a female, being an expat, the local community. There's so much to be gleaned off of just this one project you just described. So I appreciate you sharing your experience with that.
Yeah, it's good fun. And it means we get to spend time with baby turtles all the time, so that is amazing.
Yeah,
Before you go, we do have one question we like to ask everyone that comes onto the podcast, which is, what has been your favorite moment with the ocean throughout your career or your entire life? What is that one memory that you love sharing or thinking about?
One moment. I was telling somebody, I still remember it, even though it was about 7 or 8 years ago, but I did get a chance to go on a liverboard in Komodo, and my favorite animal has always been dolphins. I've always been super obsessed with dolphins since a very young age. And then, I've never ever managed to see them. We spent so many times going on these dolphin boat trips, and it was like 99% chance of seeing a dolphin, and it's like obviously 0. So it took me to coming here, and we were on a dive looking at macro stuff. So we were filming some macro things, and we just heard, the sound in the water, and it was just magical. And then to be able to turn around, my instructor actually picked me up, my tank up, and kind of threw me around, which made me angry because of whatever we were looking at. And then to watch a dolphin kind of like swim past us like that, it was truly magical. And I feel like they really do look into your soul. I understand, why so many people are in the same boat as me and find them so chillingly beautiful and so, just so amazing. And I remember having a book when I was a kid, which I read 1,000,000,001 times, about a dolphin and being able to talk to a dolphin. So one day I'm hoping that a dolphin still will want to contact me, and we can have a little chat and be friends.
That's incredible. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think my favorite animals are dolphins too. It's always circling back to it. I'm like, okay, I'm giving it a chance and say something else, but it's always dolphins. Like whenever I see dolphins at the beach,
I always have a flavor of the week, whatever you see that's amazing, but then back to dolphins.
yeah, totally agree. Well, that's a beautiful
story. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and listening to me for so long.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for coming on to the podcast today. We loved hearing about your work with Gili Tea and Gili Eco Trust. We'll be sure to share links to all of your information in the show notes for anyone that wants to follow along with your journey with the islands and with the turtles.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we do have a little fundraiser for each one of our projects, which we're slowly trying to put online. So you can adopt a turtle or a turtle nest in one of them. I guess you can adopt a horse or a horse cart for picking up all the waste. And we're trying to get all of our projects online to obviously give a little bit more transparency about what each project entails. But it gives a chance for people to be able to support, even if they can't come here and actually get on their hands and knees and pick up some rubbish on the beach. The support from all over the world is just phenomenal. I hope you guys do get a chance to come one day and I'll show you the biorocks. And thank you very much for having me.
Hopefully. Thank you. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Ocean Stories. If you'd like to follow along on Instagram, you can find us at oceanstories_podcast for updates and behind the scenes.
We'll also be sharing our ocean adventures on YouTube at Ocean Stories Podcast. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Join us next Tuesday for more Ocean Stories.